Joining us now, NBC's Vaughn Hilliard at the rally site in Mint Hill and North Carolina, and former Pennsylvania Republican Congressman Charlie Dent. So, Vaughn, no mention of Mark Robinson. What's the campaign telling you about him?
Right. Mark Robinson is nowhere to be seen here near the campaign. Of course, there has been no unendorsement at this time of the Republican running for governor here, but it's a notable absence in a state that, let's be frank, Donald Trump must win. He won North Carolina in 2016. He won it in 2020. He must win it. Instead, Donald Trump was focused on a lot of things that were not Mark Robinson here in the last hour, Katie.
All right. So what did he say today? What was the message to voters in North Carolina? It's a purple state. It's potentially a toss-up between the two candidates. What was his pitch?
There are actually two massive headlines. You know, oftentimes at these rallies and events, we hear sort of the same lines delivered by Donald Trump. And I'll try to keep this tight for you and the congressman. Number one, on tariffs, Donald Trump explicitly threatened, if he were to be president in 2025, to not only expand by putting on and implementing aggressive tariffs, but also by telling countries that, you know, if you don't play ball with us, then we're going to cut off your ability to send your goods into the United States. And when you're talking about a country like China, which, of course, in his first administration, he went toe-to-toe with in a tit-for-tat tariff war, there is the potential repercussion that we saw play out in his first administration that China, as they did in 2018, 2019, was they put retaliatory tariffs on United States goods that were being exported from here. And after traveling the country, talking to whether it be soybean farmers or lobster farmers or folks that worked in manufacturing companies, there's a great billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods that leaves the United States. And there is a potential threat that if Donald Trump were to cut off China's ability to send goods, not only goods that many Americans rely on, it would also close off markets that U.S. companies and farmers rely on overseas in places like China. The second headline was on Vladimir Zelensky. Of course, Donald Trump here, we have learned today, is not going to meet with the Ukrainian president in New York tomorrow, despite suggestions that he would potentially do just that. And Donald Trump here, in the most explicit ways yet, was critical of Zelensky from this podium here behind me. He just, quote, he's making nasty little dispersions toward your favorite president. We continue to give billions of dollars to a man who refuses to make a deal. Zelensky. Donald Trump here today articulated the idea that there is, quote, not enough money in the world to rebuild Ukraine. There have been conversations, Katie, about if Donald Trump wins the presidency again in 2025, would he be committed to providing additional U.S. financial support to Ukraine? And in the most direct way we have heard from Donald Trump's mouth yet here, he from this podium suggested in North Carolina today that the U.S. should take a serious look at no longer sending money, and a very skeptical eye on Zelensky himself, calling him the greatest salesman here. This could have far-reaching implications, as he says that he wants to broker a deal. Well, there's the suggestion here today that Ukraine, as part of the deal, should potentially cede land that Russia has already acquired here at this point.
Just a yes or no on this, Vaughn. Was he asked about this, or did he just start talking about it while he was giving his economic speech, his manufacturing speech?
No, at the end of his remarks, he went off teleprompter and went on nearly a 7-8 minute riff here about Ukraine and President Zelensky, who we should note was yesterday there at the UN General Assembly for Joe Biden's speech. Of course, he was in Pennsylvania earlier this week with Josh Shapiro.
So I asked about that because, you know, he keeps going to make, Charlie, these specific policy speeches, but instead of the big headline about the policy coming out of these speeches, the big headline is often about something else. This time it'll be what he's saying about Zelensky, making it pretty clear about what he wants to do or what he wants to potentially give to Vladimir Putin if he were back in office. But let me focus on the economy, because that is where the polls we see are tightening between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. He still maintains the lead, but there's a new Fox News poll that shows her just 5 points behind, when I think President Biden was like 15 points behind back in March. On economics, why do Republican voters, or those who like Donald Trump, still see him as better on the economy? He's talking about these tariffs. Vaughn just outlined all of the ways in which U.S. producers might suffer from this, not to mention American consumers on goods that they're trying to get from out of this country. Why do folks still give Republicans and Donald Trump so much credit on the economy?
Well, traditionally, Republicans, I think, have enjoyed a better rating from voters on matters as it relates to business and the economy because of lower taxes and a lighter regulatory touch. And I think that's been with them. But there's a real incoherence, though, to Donald Trump's economic message. Here he is insisting that countries invest in manufacturing in the United States, while at the same time, he's for blowing up a deal. Nippon Steel wants to buy U.S. Steel to invest in steel making in western Pennsylvania, and he's against it. Private sector investment. On the one hand, he's telling voters, telling these countries, you better invest in manufacturing in the U.S., while on the other hand, he's telling an ally like Japan, don't you dare invest in the United States to help us make steel better. And by the way, Biden and Harris are at the same place where Trump is on that one. So there's an incoherence to his arguments. His tariff conversation is, I think, is just so destructive. It will lead to greater inflation. It will lead to all sorts of retaliatory steps by those who are going to be hit with the tariffs. He doesn't distinguish between friend and foe when it comes to tariffs too often, and it's just an enormous economic mistake.
I'm sure that you know this better than I do, but what I found when I was often on the road talking to voters was this feeling, and this feels like old hat, but that they've been left behind, that the globalization and manufacturing being sent overseas made their lives harder. No more factory towns. The middle class got decimated. And Donald Trump comes in and he says, don't worry, I know how to fix this, and here's how I'll use tariffs. Does he have to deliver on that? Is it as easy to build things back better, to use Biden's term, here in the United States?
Look, I'm from a steel town. I'm from the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, Allentown, Bethlehem. My dad was at Bethlehem Steel for 30 years. You know, we cannot simply provide more subsidies than the Chinese and tariffs. And by the way, for every tariff that we impose on whatever the industry is, we end up killing more manufacturing jobs than we save in the industry that we are trying to protect. So if we think we're going to bring back manufacturing through tariffs, you know, we're smoking too much weed or something. It's not going to work. It never works. It will actually stifle growth. We went through protectionist eras in the 1930s. You know, we ran trade surpluses, but we had unemployment of over 20%. So bottom line is what he is pushing here as an economic policy will not bring back manufacturing. It will actually make matters worse, and it will harm a lot of manufacturers who rely on imports for their inputs to make products here in America.
Charlie Dent, you were great on this subject. Thank you very much for joining us. Von Hilliard, you too.